Hi, my name is Mark Keene from Keene Engineering, and I'm here to show you one of our latest innovations in rock crushers. This machine here is called our RC46DR double roller. And what the double roller stands for, see, here's your first set of rollers and here's your second set of rollers. Now, we've been building a single roller system since 1980, so I've actually been manufacturing this rock crusher for over 38 years, so we've got lots of experience with it. The good thing is it's proven to be a very long-lasting, robust piece of equipment. Okay, one of the more innovative things we've done in this newer model is we have a brush system that goes up against the roller. So I'll show you how that works. We have, this is just kind of a pebble, I wouldn't quite call it a belt guard, but it keeps the rocks and other debris from popping out of the rollers. So what we've got here, this is a brush system, and you can see it just pivots into position. It's also removable, really easy to take apart. But what we have here, if you can take a little closer shot in here, we have a set of rollers, okay? So you have two rollers, and what happens is you have on the inside here, you have a roller that is powered, so it's constantly under power. Then out here you have a roller that what we call is a free spinning roller. And we have a set of leaf springs here, which are really important because what they act is almost like a safety valve. In other words, if you were to drop like a coin or some slag into the roller, something that's not going to actually crush like a rock, you have a set of leaf springs here. These leaf springs will move. But this bearing is actually on a track system. If I loosen this nut and this nut, I can actually slide that bearing back and forth. And it's very important to keep everything to have it adjusted properly. So the trick is to have just a little bit of pressure pushing this roller against the back roller so they continually make each other spin. If you have too much tension on the roller, you can break some hardware, maybe break a bolt. I've even seen in some cases people will crank it down so tight that they'll actually break a shaft on a roller. You don't want to do that. That's somewhere around $400 if you break a shaft. So you have to take the time and understand how to adjust these properly. On the roller system, another aspect we have is we have a wire brush system. And what the wire brush does for you is it creates just a little bit of pressure against the roller. And remember I was saying if you have the roller too tight, it creates a problem. You have the roller too loose, it can create problems. Well, this also reduces some of the chances of having issues. What happens sometimes if you are crushing, let's say, a little bit of moisture, or you have some calciums or clays, sometimes you'll get a little film of material that will slowly build up on the roller. And what's going to happen if you have a roller is 6 inches in diameter, and as you continue to crush material, that roller increases in diameter. Well, that's going to put more load on your leaf springs, and that can cause the engine to stall or parts to even fail. So it's important to keep a roller somewhat clean. So that's why we came up with this system here. This is a stainless steel brush that just drops into position, falls against the roller. There's just a little bit of pressure here right now, okay? But what that pressure does, it allows the brushes to have a slight contact with the rollers. Any debris, it breaks anything off the rollers and allows it to fall into place. All right, so before you start anything up, there's a couple things you got to do. You have to obviously gas the engine up, and the unit comes with no oil, so you have to add your own oil into the system. So I've already pre-oiled it, and you should check your oil every morning and make sure you have a full tank of gas before you even start the machine up. To get the basic machine started, what you got to do is you have your fuel control switch right here. You have to make sure you have your fuel turned on, okay, and you have a choke off and on, and you have your throttle. So typically what I like to do is have my engine set at about 1/4 to half throttle. I'll make sure my fuel's on, choke's on, and then I'll pull it over once, and then that'll usually start it, and then use the second pull, I just close the choke. And then you want to let it run for a few minutes. Also, one other aspect that I have problems with all the time, I know I always bring it up, but do not leave fuel in your carburetor. People do this all the time. With all the new fuels we have, the methanols, the additives, you have to burn that carburetor clean at the end of each day, whether you feel like it or not. And then if you're going to leave fuel in the engine for more than a couple days, burn the fuel out of your carburetor. If you don't want to do that, then at least do add like an additive to the fuel, and you won't have any problems. All right, with a crusher like this, you do have to have a reasonable mechanical aptitude to be able to keep the machine running properly. And you also have to have a decent set of tools such as, you know, wrenches and Allen wrenches and sockets, things like that. The only really specialty tool that you might need is like a 1 1/8 inch wrench, and that's basically to adjust your rollers. So let's get back to basic operations on the machine. We've just discussed about getting the engine ready to run, and now I'm going to do a couple minor adjustments on the rollers before I even start the crusher. So the first thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and loosen these outer nuts. Loosen these nuts here so that I can make some adjustments inside. Because the only way to really adjust the crusher properly is if you adjust it when it's running. All right, the first thing you got to get adjusted on the machine is you have to get your bearings adjusted properly, get your leaf springs adjusted properly. See, right now these aren't tight, they're sloppy. The first thing I want to do is take a little bit of adjustment, and I want to get rid of the slack in here. So I'm going to take my rear nuts here, just hold those in place, and I'm just going to snug those up. And I can tell that I'm taking the play out of here, and I'm taking the play out of here. So now I'm going to switch sides, do the same thing. I'm going to tighten up my nut here, and I'm just going to adjust it so I have just a little bit of pressure on both sides. So I'm going to switch back and forth till I feel a nice even pressure. Now I'm not even pushing down with probably more than about 5 pounds of force. So I got my top ones adjusted. I think I've already adjusted my bottom ones, but I'm going to go ahead and that feels about right. That one feels about right. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and fire the machine up now. But the thing I'm looking for is I want to have just enough pressure so that both of these front rollers are spinning. Okay, I'm going to go and start it up now. So real simple. Again, make sure my fuel's on, choke on, throttle's about halfway. Make sure my engine's in the start position. Put a foot up on the trailer. Turn my choke off. The next thing I want to talk about on maintenance wise is you have a set of jaw plates in here. Now you've got what we call as a moving jaw and a stationary jaw. They're both relatively easy to change out. I'll just cover one of them, not both. So if you want to change your stationary jaw, all you have to do here is you have it, if you can look up in here, you'll see you have a single bolt. So you remove the bolt, this one right here, and then you push the bolt through. It's an Allen wrench on the other side. And this is the part here that you're gonna have to replace. It's getting really hot because it's hotter here today. Basically, there's a single Allen bolt in the middle of that you're gonna tighten up, and this goes like this inside the jaw. Now what's interesting, your jaws will always wear in a certain pattern. You'll have a wear point down here. Now what happens once you get, let's just say for example, we're gonna get 25 to 50 tons on this one side of the jaw. When this part wears out, you don't have to change the whole plate. You just simply take it out and you rotate it top to bottom. Now you can rotate this one. Now there are two jaws in the crusher. There's a moving jaw and there's a stationary jaw. This is the stationary one. Typically your moving jaw is going to last you a 2-to-1 ratio. So each side of the moving jaw, I'll probably go 10 to about 30 tons on the bottom side, then you rotate it top to bottom, and you go another 10 to 30 tons on the top side. and then on this one you'll typically go about twice. But it's very important to keep those jaw plates in good working order. If you allow the machine to run the jaws all the way down, then you can start tearing into the main machine, then you get into some expensive maintenance. Also, the jaws can be hard faced, okay? And when I talk about hard facing, you can take like a arc welder or a MIG welder with some special rods. I think they use called a Stewie rod is common. And if you can build the low points up, you can actually take take welds that go straight up and down. You can't go across, you can't go this way. All the welds have to go straight up and down. If you, but the only tricky part is it takes kind of a talented welder. You don't want to overheat the jaw plate and have it warp and turn into a potato chip. So again, it takes a little bit of practice, but you run your weld straight up and down only, and it takes a little practice to get the use of it, but that's really, really important for maintenance issues. Here's another new feature we put on the latest crushers. We were having some issues of the machine stalling, so what we did is we just stacked up a series of shims in the jaw plate itself, and that's actually making quite a difference. Okay, we're over here looking at the crusher. You got two areas that we're going to concentrate on right now. We have the bearing system and the chain system. The chain system, if you can, you want to lubricate it with a dry lube like you use like on a mountain bike or something. This will give you less dirt and grime will end up collecting on the chain. Probably one of the most important facets of this crusher, if you want to have a good long life, is to apply just a little bit of grease to your bearings, maybe once a week. And the most important thing is do not over grease your bearings. You just take a grease gun like one of the small hand ones and you just put a little bit of grease, and if you feel any back pressure, you stop. If you continually pump grease into these bearings, you've got actually bearing caps on both sides. If those bearing caps are over pressurized, you blow one of them opening, then the bearing can't hold grease. Dirt and grime gets in the machine, and then you can kiss your bearings goodbye. You don't want to fry these things. They're like 500 bucks a piece. And again, they're some of the best bearings in the world. They're Browning double tapered roller bearings, but they're not a cheap date. So if you want to keep this thing running, take what I said is super important. Just put a little grease once a week. Feel any back pressure, stop. If you see any grease oozing out, clean it up and just don't put any more grease in it. So do not over grease these bearings. All right, another super important issue on the rock crusher is the air cleaner. I cannot say enough. I probably have half to 2/3 of my customers blow their engines up in the first year. It's always for the same reason. They allow the air cleaners to get dirty, and if they try to clean it, they don't clean it properly. See, the air cleaner looks like this. You have a paper element and you have a foam cover. You can take this foam cover off and you can clean it. You can take this apart here, remove all this, and just shake it and tap it, and that's okay. But you can only do that so many times. The worst thing you can do is take an air compressor and blow air into here, and then what happens, you end up opening up the pores in the paper, and then all of a sudden you let the dust. And you got to remember something. What are we doing with the crusher? We are making powder. And I kind of kid around, I call it death dust to a motor. Think about it. You take like a quartz type rocks, which is very brittle, sharp, and you crush it into fine powder. So you have this 100 mesh dust that is just razor sharp. So if you get any of that death dust into the engine, you can kiss your engine goodbye. So if you take care of this, and you keep your oil clean, you maintain your air cleaners, and I would suggest you go buy a bunch of these online, carry an arsenal of them. And there's also a couple of things you can do as well, but super, super important. But what we do, I do two different tricks. You'll notice over here, I have a fan positioned behind me, okay? And what I do with the fan is I'll turn the fan in, and any dust that the rock crusher generates, it gets pushed away from the crusher itself. So that way I know I always have clean air. Another common trick that I do is I have one of those little 3-foot long manhole cover vents. I'll take that and I'll bring it here and I'll actually position it up, lean it up against the trailer, and I'll have the clean air blowing from underneath. And that way, again, I know that I'm going to have a dust-free air cleaner. But again, with the crusher, you're creating death dust for the rock crusher. So always have a small arsenal of air cleaners. Keep your oil clean, even though the manual says change your oil every something like 40 hours. Because of the kind of environment we're running in, and very harsh environment, you want to change your oil probably twice as much, or at least every 30 hours or so. So maintenance is critical. I love selling engines, but you know, that's good for us, but not good for the customer. So maintain this motor. If you take care of this, it'll take care of you. Okay, I haven't even thrown my first rock in, but there's a couple basic things you got to have. You have to have some kind of safety glasses. You need to have a hard hat because the machine does shoot rocks at it on occasion, so you don't want rocks landing on your head. Not to beat a dead horse, you have to have spare air cleaners. If not, don't even run your first rock through it. It's just kind of a mandatory thing. And probably one of the most important things, you have to have a good quality respirator. You know, back to what I said previously. What is the crusher making? This fine, razor sharp powder. And again, we can call it death dust for you and the motor. So I always use a nice, easy breathing respirator, and I find it to be very effective. And they're comfortable. This is actually a nice one. It's a 3M one, and it's a particulate filter, and that's really what you're looking for. So these are all things you have to have before you even run your first rock through it. All right, so we're getting ready to run the rocks through the first time, but just a quick pre-check. Gas, oil, rollers adjusted, shims in the jaw set, and just doing a once-over, make sure everything's seems like it's in good, proper working order. So I'm going to start feeding the crusher now with some rocks, and because the machine hasn't been run in the past, it has to kind of break in having material pass through it. There's paint on things, and the jaws have paint on them possibly, so, and the rollers are nice and smooth. It takes a little time for everything to break in before you can really start running material through it aggressively. So you start off slow and you work your way up. All right, so I've gone ahead and run the crusher for about, maybe about 10 minutes or so. And I just want to show you the kind of material that we're getting out of it. It's actually pretty warm to the touch, but if you look here, you have a very fine powder. It's probably down in the neighborhood of, I'd say, you know, 50 to 100 mesh, somewhere there. Now you might see some bigger items, but if you can look close, you can zoom in on this. These wafers, they're powder, but they're actually, well, we call them pancakes. It's just compressed material. Now, if I take that, I put it between my fingers, and I smear it, it disappears. It's just the rock I have happens to have a lot of calcium or maybe a lot of clays or whatever in it, and that sometimes causes some issues. But if you look here, pretty fine stuff overall. I mean, all that's going to fall through probably like a 50 mesh screen, and then this oversized stuff, it just powders. So it's doing a pretty good job. So you can see the machine's doing an excellent job. We're at a point now, I don't worry about overloading the machine. We kind of snuck up on it. I didn't just overload the hopper, but the good thing, once you have the machine adjusted properly, you really can't overfeed it. You can just load this hopper up and it'll just keep processing and processing the material, which I really love. So we just took a 5-gallon bucket of material. It's got about 80 pounds of gravel, probably about 75 pounds of gravel. I got a pound or two for the 5-gallon bucket. So we'll do a quick time test on it. Also, you might want to notice that my air cleaner on the engine is totally clean because it had the fan blowing on it. So let me fire this thing up and we'll process a 5-gallon bucket, 75 pounds of gravel, see how well it does. All right, did I mention that this is not a clean job? These were black shorts and black pants. But anyways, I'm gonna do now what you don't ever want to have to do, but you'll have to on occasion. I'm gonna lock the whole machine up with everything loaded. Typically, it doesn't happen often. If you overload the machine with the wrong kind of material, if you have a lot of moisture in the material, and you have material building up on the rollers, you can jam up once in a while, but you have to understand how to get the machine unjammed. So I'm going to throw a couple of rocks in here. I'm going to shut the engine off to simulate these problems. And it's not a fun procedure, but you absolutely have to know how to do it. Okay, so there's material in the jaw, there's material in the rollers. So we have to open up the rollers now and get the material out. So it sucks, but it's something you have to deal with once in a while. So I got my two 1 1/8" wrenches. I'm going to start with my bottom roller. I take the outer nut off first, or not off, but out to the end. I back the inner nut all the way towards the bearing. I'll do it on this side. Now, if you watch close here, see how I just shifted the bearings forward and back? By opening that up, what I did is I just allowed the material to fall through the roller. Now I'm going to repeat the whole process on the top. Same thing. I'm gonna take the nuts and I'm gonna drive them all the way till they hit the bearing. Again, drive the nut all the way up against the bearing. And I'm going to pull that bearing towards me. Okay, so it's that. So I now have about a half-inch gap in both sets. I'm going to look into my jaw. I got a few little pebbles in here left over. I'm just going to pick these out by hand. There's really not much in there. If it's really overloaded with the jaw, though, you have to clear it out by hand. And I'll tell you what, since you already have electricity to run a fan, it's really handy if you have a shop vac. We can actually suck this clear. Also, you can go into here too, and you can remove your brush, and you can vacuum it clean in there as well. So you put a shop vac in here, get this clear, make sure that one's clear, and make sure that one's clear. All very, very important stuff. All right. I'm going to walk over here. I'm going to fire it up just to make sure there's nothing left in it. It's clear. So now I'm going to have to go through the whole readjustment process on the pressure. So what am I going to do? Push my rollers both in. Okay. I take my lock nuts, or my nuts that are up against the rollers, and I'm going to manually drive them up all the way till I hit the springs. Now I'm going to take the inner nuts, and I'm just a little bit of pressure. I'm taking all the slack out of the leaf spring. I'm just trying to achieve kind of an even pressure. So now I'm just gonna go pull it through one more time. I just want to make sure that the roller was spinning. So now I'm going to go adjust the bottom ones. Again, you can see I'm trying to achieve a nice, just a little bit of pressure on each roller. I'm going to pull it over real quick. Okay, now that they're both kind of close, now I'm going to start the engine and kind of do the final adjustment. After using each time, you want to go ahead, clean the machine up, spray it off with air pressure, check your air cleaners, check your oil. I can't emphasize enough how important maintenance is on this machine. But that's about all the basics on it. I hope I gave you enough to keep you out of trouble. And again, back to the bearing, maybe once a week, just a little touch of grease. Don't over grease it, but those little hints, you should be in good shape.